Welcome to this exciting journey of building a semi-detached house from scratch. Over the next 45 minutes, I'll take you through every step of the way of building a house. From acquiring the plot to the final finishing touches. Whether you're planning on building your own house or you're just curious about the subject, this video will give you valuable insights to what it's like to build a house in Finland. I'm pretty sure that whatever country you're watching this from, the building process is quite different from Finland. But nonetheless, I'm excited to show you how we do things here in Finland. Building a house is a complex and exciting journey that takes skilled professionals, careful planning, and patience. In this video, I will do my best to break down every single step of the way, highlighting the key challenges and the solutions to those challenges. The goal of the video is to give you a great understanding of what it takes to build a house here in Finland. Let's go! The first step of any project is acquiring the plot. So you can acquire the plot in basically two different ways. The most straightforward way would be to buy the plot straight from the market. But here in Finland, near the city of Tampere, and all the other cities nearby, the prices of the plots are really high. So it doesn't really make sense to buy a plot. You won't be making any money out of those projects if you buy the plots straight out. The other way to get a plot here is to win the plot out of a plot lottery. Here the cities, they make a lottery for plots usually each fall. And if you take part into these plot lotteries, you have a chance to win yourself a plot. And the plots that you get from these plot lotteries, they're usually from a really good area. They're not anywhere like outskirts of the town. They're usually in pretty good spots. In this case, I took part in a plot lottery, and there were 20 other people taking part in this same lottery. This was straight after the COVID pandemic, so not a lot of people were interested in plot lotteries, as they were scared of what's gonna be happening around the world, and the interest rates of loans were going up. So there were 4 plots to be won, and 20 people took part in this lottery, and I was one of the lucky ones, and I got myself a plot. The plot is of course not totally free, it's a rent plot, but it's from a pretty good location, so at least the location won't be an issue. After winning the plot in November or December 2022, I knew I had about half a year of time to hire all of the engineers to design the house and get the permit to build. Usually the best time to build is right before summer starts, so you can get all of the excavation works done and you can get a roof on top of yourself before winter comes. Doing excavation work or any other construction work without a roof on top of your head is not very optimal. So now to the second step of hiring myself an architect and all the other engineers. So after finding a suitable architect, we went to his office and started negotiating about designing the house. First, we started thinking about should we build just a normal house or should we start to build a semi-detached house, and we quickly came to the conclusion that building a semi-detached house gave us more square meters to sell. So we quickly decided that building a semi-detached house would be the best decision at the time for me. After we decided that we were going to build the semi-detached house, we started to think about how many rooms should each apartment have, how many bathrooms, and that kind of stuff. After getting the general gist of the thing that we were trying to build there, the architect started to do the first sketches. As the architect was doing the first sketches, I was already trying to get myself all of the other engineers. I needed a structural engineer, a heating, plumbing and ventilation engineer, an air conditioning engineer, and an electrical engineer. After I hired all of the engineers, I knew I was in a hurry because I needed to get all of the plans done and I needed to get the permit to build before summer started. This was the first time I was building a house from scratch, and I was also part of the designing team as I was the one starting the project. This was the first time in those shoes, so everything was not gonna be perfect, but I did the best I could at the time. We had to design what kind of ventilation system should go into the house, how are we gonna heat the house, what kind of heating system are we gonna put into the house, what was the shape of the house gonna be, what was the building material of the house gonna be, and I was going back and forth with all of the engineers trying to design the house as fast as I possibly could. And as a Finnish person, of course, each of the apartments was gonna have a sauna that was a non-negotiable. Having a sauna in your house in Finland is almost mandatory. If I remember correctly, there are like 2 or 3 million saunas in Finland, even though we only have about 5.5 million people here. So having a sauna is a big deal in your house. So the sauna was going to be a non-negotiable here. So as the engineering team was designing the house, I knew I had to lock in all of the subcontractors, so I could actually calculate how much the project was going to cost. So at the same time I was sending hundreds of emails trying to lock in all of the deals with the subcontractors. I need subcontractors to do the excavation work, to build the foundations, to actually do the carpenter work on the house, to do the tiling, etc, etc. And also, as I was doing the deals with the subcontractors, I was also asking them about how long each of them is going to be working on the project. By doing this, I was able to already make out a schedule at an early stage for how long the construction project is gonna take. Usually making a schedule for a project like this, the easiest way is not to just tell the subcontractors that you can take this long to build it, but usually the best way that works for me is to ask them how long is it gonna take. And usually when they give me a time, they are definitely gonna stick to their own schedule. If the subcontractors tell me that it's gonna take a week, usually if they even take a tiny bit of pride in their own work, they're gonna stick to their own schedule. So by asking my subcontractors about how long they were gonna take for each step of the way, I was able to quickly make out a schedule for the house. Doing all of this, I was working 40 hours a week for somebody else as a construction site foreman. So I was doing this all on the side, so I knew I couldn't be doing 40 hours of construction work here because I was already working 40 hours for somebody else. But luckily I didn't have to hire a construction site foreman for this project. As I was already working as a construction site foreman for somebody else, I had all the credits that the city needed to apply myself as a construction site foreman for my own project. Here in Finland, a responsible foreman is required by law for every construction project that requires a permit. So at least I didn't have to hire anybody from the outside to do this job. So now that the design process was done, I had hired all of the subcontractors, I made out the schedule, and I finally got the permit right around when summer started. So now before the construction can start, I had to have an official meeting, which was the start of the work city inspection. The start of the work city inspection is not really anything crazy, it's just that an official person from the county comes in and looks at the plot and makes sure that everything is okay for you to start the construction work, that you have a permit that was approved by the city. So right after that, we got straight into the excavation work. And of course, not long into the excavation work, we bumped into some bedrock. This means that there was going to be some explosion work on the site because we had to get rid of some of the bedrock to make sure that all of the drains are going to work. And as all of you know, you can't make drain water run uphill, so we had to get rid of some of the bedrock to make sure that all of our drains are going to be flowing downhill. The drain and gutter system is mandatory here in Finland. I've seen videos of people building houses in other countries, and I've always wondered, why is the gutter and drain system not mandatory in all countries? Some people just build the foundations straight into the ground without doing any of the excavation work that is usually done here in Finland. That might be because here in Finland there's always going to be freezing weathers for around half of the year. This means that the ground is going to be freezing during the winter and then it's going to be melting again during the summer. If we do not prevent the constant freezing and melting of the ground is going to move for sure. And in the worst case scenario, this can eventually cause your house to collapse. So that's why here in Finland we take extra precautions to make sure that the ground underneath our foundations is not constantly freezing and melting. So the first thing we do to avoid the constant freezing and melting is to use crushed stone that does not have any fine particles in it. That is because using this kind of rock prevents the capillary action of water. The capillary action of water is when water starts rising upwards against gravity, and usually the capillary action needs to have really tight spaces, like for example if you have sand or even clay under your house. In sand or clay the capillary action happens pretty easily, so we want to avoid that at all costs, and the best way to make sure that capillary action does not take place is to use crushed stone that does not have the finest particles in it. So we used crushed stones to fill out the underneath of our foundations, and then when we get near to our foundation level, we're going to start to use crushed stone that does not have the finest particles in it. And now that we get to the foundation level, we're going to stop the excavation work for now, and we're going to start our work on the foundations. I know I skipped the parts of the gutter system that are installed under the foundations that keep the ground dry. But to make sure that the video goes on swiftly, I'm not going to be talking about every single detail that goes into the house, but if you want to hear about the mandatory gutter system that's underneath the foundations, I can make a separate video on that. Also, if there's other subjects about building in Finland that you want to hear about, make sure to let me know, because I can definitely make more videos about construction related subjects here in Finland. And as a side note, I'm also now building an apartment building. I'm working there as the responsible foreman, and I have a lot of video material of it. So if you want me to make a video about that in English, please make sure to let me know, and I will definitely do that for you guys. But now getting back to the foundations. The foundation work starts with the responsible foreman ordering the city inspector to mark out the corners of the foundation's footings. After the city has marked the corners of the footings, from that point on, the subcontractor that's going to be building the foundations is going to take over. First, they're going to build the molds to the footings, then they're going to put the rebar in it, and after the rebar work has been done, they're going to pour the concrete of the footings. After that, they're going to repeat the same process to the plinth of the foundations. So they're going to do the moldings, then they're going to do the rebarings, and then they're going to order the concrete and do all of the concrete work. They're also going to be installing all of the insulation that's going to be going on the foundations, and I have to be sure that the subcontractors are going to be doing the rebarring right, and that they're going to be ordering the right concrete. The foundations are going to be in a constant battle against the weather and the elements, so as I am the responsible one of the project, so I need to be sure that the concrete in the foundation needs to have resistance against erosion. So the foundation needs to have resistance against erosion, and the concrete needs to be pretty tough. It's going to be taking on the whole structural load of the house. Now that the foundation work is done and that we have waterproofed the foundations, we are going to be continuing in filling up the plot with the crushed stone. And we have to also remember to put in the crushed stone without the finest particles near all of the places that we want to protect against the capillary action, which basically means anywhere near the foundations we're going to be using that type of crushed stone. The waterproofing of the foundations was used by this thing called a patolevy. It's pretty common here in Finland. It's not anything crazy, but it adds an extra protection layer against the weather and the elements. So during the filling out process of the plot, after the foundations were done, we also installed some insulation around the foundations. The insulation is there to make sure that the ground beneath the foundations is never going to be below freezing. There is actually two ways of achieving this, that the ground is never going to be below freezing. One is to make sure that the foundations are built so deep that the earth is not going to be freezing there. But that is just not going to be cost effective. So that's why here in Finland we're going to be insulating the house also from the outside to make sure that the earth beneath the foundations are not going to be freezing. There's this fun little map here that shows you that how deep you have to go in different parts of Finland to make sure that the ground is not going to be freezing. Here near the city of Tampere, ground is not going to be freezing at around 2.1 meters. But of course we did not dig that deep here, so we're going to be insulating around the house. Now that we're filling out the plot from the outside, we're also going to be filling out the plot from inside the foundations. During the filling out process of the inside of the foundations, we're going to be installing the radon pipes. The radon pipes are there just in case that there's going to be radon gas coming from underneath the house. So the radon pipes are going to be eventually, they're going to be led through the house, through the roof, into the outside air. So after the house is complete, if there's any signs of radon gas inside the house, we can install a suction machine on top of the radon pipe that's going to be constantly putting on suction to the pipe. The constant suction in the pipe makes sure that poisonous radon gas coming from under the house is going to be sucked into the pipes. So there can actually never be a case that radon gas gets into the living space of the house. Installing this empty pipe while we're filling up the plot is actually really cheap, and I recommend that everyone should do it, and here in Finland it's also mandatory. The cost of an empty pipe underneath the concrete slab is pretty much half free, so it's really a good guarantee against cases like poisonous radon gas getting into the house. So make sure to install your radon pipes. After the plot is filled up to the point where the work on the concrete slab can start, the excavators are gonna leave the plot. Now we can start the next step of the construction, which is building the frame or the concrete slab. Here in this project, I chose to build the concrete slab first. The building of the concrete slab of course starts with the insulation. Here in the Nordics, it's gonna be freezing for half of the year, so insulation is a big deal. The ground is gonna be pretty cold for most of the time, so 200 millimeters of insulation is required. We're also going to be heating up the house with water circulating floor heating, so we don't want any of the floor heating heat to go into the ground. So there needs to be insulation stopping all of our heat energy from going into the ground. While we're installing the insulation, we're also going to be installing the vapor barrier plastic. The vapor barrier plastic is going to go underneath the slab and from there into the walls. By putting the vapor barrier plastic underneath the slab, it's going to make sure that the vapor barrier plastic is going to be really airtight. We're also going to be installing this little strip that makes sure that the foundations and the concrete slabs are never going to be touching. This is to make sure that the foundations and the concrete slab are not connected and they're not going to be cracking unwantedly. And as a third bonus, we're also going to be installing a radon strip to the seam of the foundation and the concrete slab. This is also an extra precaution to make sure that no radon gas is going to be coming into the living space from in between the foundations and the concrete slab. Now, after all of those are installed, we're going to be putting in the rebar. The rebar's primary function is to make sure that the floor does not crack, but it also has a secondary function, which is to keep the water circulating heat pipes in place. So after the installation of the rebars, the plumber can get to work and install the water circulating heat pipes. After all of those things, we're gonna be double checking that the drains are in the right place, that the electricity is coming to the house from the right spot, and the water pipe is also coming into the house from the right spot. When we're sure that all of those things are met, and also all of the little special things about the house are met, like our extra little airway that goes into the slab and through the foundations, just in case that someone wants to put a fireplace later on into the house, and that our water air pump has a connection to the outside from the inside of the house. And after we make sure that there's an empty pipe going into the slab and through the foundation for the air water pump, we can finally order the concrete and the concrete crew to do all of the concrete work. Here, when we are ordering the concrete, we have to be a little bit careful as well, because we're going to be using two different kinds of concrete. The first concrete is going outside as well, so it needs to have all of the qualities that make it more water resistant and weather resistant. That means resistance against erosion. The concrete that's going to be going inside of the house for the main slab, that doesn't need to have all of these good qualities, so it can be a bit cheaper. But after we've made sure of all of that, the concrete crew can finally get to work. We're also going to be installing the vinyl flooring later on straight on top of the concrete, so during the concrete work we need to make sure that they're doing a very good job. The vinyl flooring needs an almost perfectly straight floor, so the concrete guys need to make sure that the concrete work is done almost perfectly. After the concrete slab was done, we could finally start the framing of the house. The framing starts with the installation of the mud sill, but before we can slap the mud sill on top of the foundation, we need to prevent the capillary action of water from rising from the foundations to the mud sill. That's why we're going to be using cellular plastic, so that the mud sill will not rot in the future. The foundations are always going to have a little bit of moisture in them, and we really don't want to take any risks of the mud sill starting to rot. So that's why we're going to be taking these extra precautions that are also mandatory here in Finland. After the mud sills, we're going to be moving straight on to the vertical framing of the house, which is actually pretty simple. You just follow along the plans of the structural engineer, taking into account all of the doorways and taking into account all of the windows. On top of doorways and windows, there's going to be structural beams that are going to be taking on the load coming from above and moving it on to the vertical frame. During the installation of the beams or the joists, the carpenters have to be really careful that they're going to be installing the vapor barrier plastic on the right side of the beams. This was a special project, so the vapor barrier plastic was designed sometimes to the inside of the beam and sometimes to the outside of the beam. So there were some tricky places that the carpenters had to be extra careful. The rest of the vapor beam barriers were going to be installed later on, as they were not going to be getting in the way of the next few construction steps. So after the vertical framing and the installation of the beams, we moved on to the installation of the joists of the second floor. The joists were installed according to plan, and as you can see, some of the joists were installed 40 millimeters lower than other joists. That is because the bathroom floors are going to be needing drainage, so we need to make sure that the concrete on the second floor is going to have proper inclination towards the drain. So that's why some of the joists are 40 millimeters lower than the other joists. During the installation of the joists, we were also installing the wind barrier boards. The wind barrier boards are going to be keeping the wind outside of the house and are going to be preventing the wind going straight into the insulation. The wind barrier board also has a secondary function, which is to stiffen the frame. Without the wind barrier board and just with the vertical framing, the house would be a little bit flimsy. But the wind barrier board makes a good job in making the house stiff. So now that the wind barrier sheets were installed to the first floor and the joists were installed to the second floor, we did the exact same steps to the second floor. Winter was coming in fast, so we knew that we needed to get a roof on top of our heads fast. So we made sure to install the roof trusses as quick as possible. On top of the roof trusses, I used waterproof plywood because I didn't want to take any risks of the roof material starting to mold. Especially as winter was coming in fast, I knew that we weren't going to be able to get the roof done before the snow would start to fall. So getting the waterproof plywood was the right choice now looking back at it, even though it was a little bit more expensive than using normal OSB board. But now that the waterproof plywood was installed, I made sure to get the roof contractor on the plot as fast as possible. The roofing job starts with installing the underlayment. The underlayment is usually a big deal in construction sites because it makes sure that the house is waterproof at an early stage, even though the roofing might take a bit longer. But now that the underlayment was installed, we could start the installation of the insulation inside without having to worry that the insulation might get wet. So going back on top of the roof contractors were going to be installing a tin roof. This particular tin roof has a double joint, and this type of tin roofing that has the double joint is considered to be one of the best types of roofs here in Finland. That is because of the double joints, the roofs basically never leak. And all of the companies that do these types of tin roofs, they always give a no leak guarantee of at least 10 years. And in my experience, if you use other types of roofs like felt coverings or stuff like that, they usually tend to leak somewhere. So getting this tin roofing was the only choice and the right choice for this project.